right, let's roll. Welcome to the first episode of the new year of the smartest people in the room. 2021 is sure off to an explosive start, and we are pleased to kick things off with what promises to be a really informative and positive session. We are glad you're here with us. Today's episode is very timely. With everything going on in the live music industry, especially with the pandemic and its impact on the live side of the industry, today's guests are inspiring problem solvers who are working very hard to enhance opportunities for venues and touring acts. Before we get started, let me take care of some business. First, to the audience, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat window. The reason we do these webinars is twofold. First, we want to showcase really smart people and the amazing work that they do day to day in the music industry. But the second reason is a bit more nuanced. Many of you know that I am a music industry headhunter. By definition and function, I help people connect with companies. In this series, my goal is to help you make more connections, and I invite you to take full advantage of that opportunity. Specifically, I invite you to engage with the speakers and the other attendees in the chat of the Zoom. Please introduce yourselves, say hello to your friends, and make some new ones. And ask questions of our speakers. We will try to address as many of these as possible during the interview. And also, please make sure you set your chat setting to address speakers and attendees, not just the speakers. I want to thank our program sponsors for without their support, we couldn't do what we do. I want to thank First Horizon Bank, Bufkin Baker, Four Roses Bourbon, the Fairlane Hotel, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission, Lightning 100, Tennessee Brew Works, Moo TV, Jive Printing, Project Music, and Cushmaster's brand of CBD products. So let's get down to business. In today's host seat, we welcome Stephen Sternschein. Stephen founded Heard Presents in 2010, which has grown to be one of the largest independent concert promoters in Texas, having served as its managing partner for nearly a decade. In 2015, he co-founded the Red River Cultural District Merchants Association, a nonprofit dedicated to preserving Austin's walkable live music district, serving on its board and as its president until 2017. He co-founded Prism.fm in 2017, which is a process management solution for venues and promoters, serving as its chief product officer, chief strategy officer, and finally as its president. Beginning in 2019 at the onset of the pandemic, Stephen founded Banding Together, a fundraising drive that delivered over $200,000 in direct financial relief to more than 3,000 artists, production and hospitality workers in Austin, Texas. This led him to also co-founding NEVA, the National Independent Venue Association, which now represents over 2,800 independent venues and promoters around the country. As a result of the NEVA effort has been the Save Our Stages advocacy effort, inspiring over 2 million messages to Congress, and the bipartisan support SOS Act legislation addressing the unique challenges facing small businesses in the live music sector across the country. Stephen received his JD in 2009 from Brooklyn Law School and his undergraduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania in 2005. His first music gig was working as a production assistant on the World Cafe, a nationally syndicated show by WXPN. In his spare time, he also plays music with his friends. Welcome, Stephen. And joining Stephen as today's special guest is John Petrocelli. John is CEO and founder of Bulldog DM, the world's most experienced live stream studio. Bulldog DM captivates and connects audiences with compelling interactive live stream video that transforms viewers into participants. Bulldog DM produces and distributes live streams across all devices and platforms, as well as bespoke white label content destinations. Their programming has earned over 1 billion audience engagements for Fortune 500 and independent clients across music, sports, entertainment, and more. John's been instrumental in helping companies establish optimal strategies to distribute and monetize their video content for over 20 years, including Spotify, Procter & Gamble, Netflix, Apple, AT&T, Samsung, American Express, the NFL, Coca-Cola, Sony, Nestle, Snickers, Hyundai, Nissan, Jeep, Facebook, and even music icon Prince, helping Prince develop the first major artist direct-to-consumer digital music store that garnered a Billboard Award for Best Use of Technology by an Artist and a Webby Award. Previously, John was VP of Sales and Biz Dev at AEG. After selling his company to AEG, where he led live streaming engagements for Coachella, Lollapalooza, Austin City Limits, Rock in Rio, TED Conference, the Grammys, the Oscars, and the Masters. He's been a sought-after speaker for his experience at CES, NAB, South by Southwest, and the Harvard Business School. His previous companies where he led sales and business development were acquired by Google and Akamai. Please welcome these two amazing guests to the smartest people in the room. Take it away, boys.
Oof. What a great introduction.
How about that?
Thanks, Tom.
So, John, how far back should we start with our discussion? Should we start with how you ended up in the live streaming space? Would that be a good place to start? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so, and I'm happy to talk about it. Largely, this came forth from my relationship with Prince. Back in the people might recall there were the things called the format wars, where it was Microsoft Windows Media versus Reel versus Apple QuickTime, and I was in the CDN, the Content Delivery Network, business, and delivering content for all of a varied client base. And some of those clients were broadcasters, they were record labels, and Apple had come to me and said, "Hey, you're doing a great job facilitating QuickTime. We have an artist that approached us that wants to do it directly in themselves. Would you be interested in a dialogue?" And I said, "Sure." And I said, "Who's the artist?" And it was Prince, and I'm obviously a lifelong huge fan. And it was interesting. Back then, I was involved in things like DRM and anti-piracy and encryption, which is really hard. It's technical. It's hard to explain. And this is more in the downloading days, before streaming and mobile handsets. And to kind of short circuit the conversation, I had an engineer take a file of Purple Rain and encrypt it, and I sent it over to my contact at Prince. And I got this email back in the middle of the night that said, Prince says, when you went to play the file, it asked you to be authenticated, i.e., pay something or do something rather than just randomly file share it. And I got an email back in the middle of the night that said, Prince says this is exactly what I want to do, and it was EYE and the number 2 for 2. And we were pretty much off to the races. We built this music store, and Prince filled it with audio, video, full length records, EPs. It was just an incredible experience to go through the lens of you could say the world's most successful independent artist. And to get to your question about live, how I get into that is he embarked upon this massive tour. A lot of people looked at it as this big kind of comeback. And he came to us and said, "I want to sell the best tickets in the house to the fan base and the fan club only, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tickets." And we had to quickly scale and build a solution to do that. And as a result, I got to go see some opening nights before the tour and see him perform. And I ended up seeing Prince, 44 times, I think, in my life. Each show completely different. And it dawned on me, hey, there's going to become a moment in time where this should be a shared experience. Like the things I'm witnessing, seeing him play and jam, like in his living room with Stevie Wonder, or seeing him on, the stage at the Staples Center and then in an after party. And I was advising a live streaming company for years, and they had asked me to come in, take it over and operate as the CEO. And it was really that Prince experience that kind of led me, I think I should do this. And no sooner had I done that, and I think in 40 days, AEG decided to buy the company. So I quickly went into, being under the umbrella of, at the time, the world's largest presenter of live music and live sports. And what happened along the way is I had started a conversation with YouTube about why live might be important to them. And all these things came together. We had this proof of concept, and we had Alicia Keys perform at an AEG venue in New York, brought to the viewer by American Express on YouTube. And the way it worked perfectly. YouTube came back and said, we had a really happy artist, we had a super happy brand in Amex, and we had a terrific, delighted audience. We want to be in this business. But at the time, we're a VOD company. So for the next 2-3 years, we began to power things on YouTube, Coachella, Bonnaroo, Rock in Rio, Lollapalooza, Royal Wedding, you name it. In addition to our existing customer base and things we were doing at AEG. But it was really that kind of process of seeing my eyes open through the eyes of an artist, and probably the greatest, live performer of all time, which led to the business that I'm in today.
So there's two different directions we could go from there. I'd love to, so tell us about your time at AG. What was that like working in a big organization, going from, maybe like a startup kind of mentality into a big corporation? Just, I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Tim Lewicki was at the CEO at the time, and he bought the company, and he said, I'm going to get out of your way and I'm going to empower you. And he was true to his word. We were able to really do almost anything we wanted and build this really terrific business. And along the way, we're also doing things like powering things like the Grammys, the Oscars, the Masters, et cetera. So that was really helpful. And, I remember Dan Beckerman, who's now CFO, now CEO, just being a big, helpful advocate along the way as well. And for me, it was a terrific experience. Live is the DNA of AEG. So we were, heavily involved in all kinds of different things. If concepts came down to the campus, we were typically, my little team was involved. And one of the reasons we were, part of the reasons I think we were acquired was AEG was kind of opening the LA Live campus, it was like 4,000, massive square feet that included, the Staples Center, the Nokia Theater, the Grammy Museum, the Target Terrace, all kinds of different places for content to happen across that campus. And we were helping advise on, how would we include, panels where you could plug in a camera and be streaming and doing things in that regard. And that kind of led to the roll up, but it was for us, a great experience. Again, we were a very small business inside of this giant company, but it was a great learning experience. I think it created the basis to form Bulldog, right? I kind of knew a lot about the market and the industry. I learned a great deal. And I thought, now's the time to do this independently, knowing that content's going to be everywhere, not just YouTube. It'll be Facebook, Twitter, you name it, but also, artists want to do their own thing, like Prince, and go about this business themselves. So I thought, hey, it's an interesting time now. Learned a great deal, and now let's go apply it out into the world.
So it's really exciting to, talk to somebody who has really literally been there kind of from the beginning of live streaming until today. And I know that, at least from my viewpoint, coming in like a child wandering into the middle of a movie, even a decade ago, there have been a lot of technical challenges and hurdles in terms of delivering that content in a way that's, I suppose, high enough quality or acceptable from an artist perspective, from a consumer perspective. There have been challenges in the marketplace as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of those hurdles and from your perspective and how they've been overcome and kind of where we are today as opposed to, where we've started?
Yeah, in fact, the early days of live streaming, the failures that was the big public, news events. You might recall, like the Victoria's Secret fashion show, like quote, crashed the internet. And I think Oprah Winfrey did a big event as well. So the news for live streaming was around, hey, this actually didn't work, or people couldn't get in and they got shut out. And what we started to see was this, I'd say, proliferation of connected devices starting to enter the market. And the market really changed, I think around, smartphones. The smartphones could play video. We started to see, hey, we're going to see more live content. And then, I think second, the social media platforms began to offer live video. Facebook in, I think, 2015 had a beta product. Everyone who was maybe at South by one year recall when, Twitter made an acquisition, Periscope. And I think there was a different company that was really hot, and then they bought Periscope. And then we started, obviously Amazon's $1 billion spend of Twitch started to move the industry forward. And we started to get past a lot of these limitations and challenges. And then the kind of the big underpinning wave underneath all that was the rise of the, call it the experience economy, right? Millennials value being at concerts and shows and events more so than they do buying like a house or a watch or a car. So we had all those things kind of created, in my opinion, the perfect storm to get us, to where we are. And so the industry was kind of creeping along. It started to accelerate in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years. And then we step into the pandemic, and the whole industry kind of now goes to front and center around everything. It's now been largely, the virtual experience is now this kind of replacement until we're back into real, call it IRL or in real life events. And that's kind of been the progression. And fortunately, all these things have helped move the industry forward. But at the end of the day, it's still, I would say, it's complex to do this. It's hard. It's again, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of pressure. For music, I would say the big kind of takeaway I've had is music artists prioritize and value the audio more than they do the video, right? Which makes sense, right? The inherent is their music is listened to as a recorded asset more so than anything. And that's really, really important to them. So I've clearly taken, hey, we're going to do a live stream. The audio's got to be as pristine as we can possibly make it.
So let's talk about, the past. Let's talk about where you were in March or April, take your pick. And like, what was it like? How did you come to the, like, I assume there must have been a point where it became clear that you're going to have to put everything into turbo, because there was a big opportunity and a big need. What was that moment like for you? When did it happen?
Really interesting. We were powering the Spotify Awards on March 5th in Mexico City. And it was Spotify's first live event. And they picked a really ambitious project. And this is their first award show. It's in the region that's got their most, installed active users. And they curated this massive lineup of, the biggest, J Balvin, you name it, they were all performing. And it was a big task for us to build and kind of, pull off that project, partially because it was also carried, I think, in the US on, Telemundo, and it was on, Turner Latin America or South America in that part of the world. We also had to build the streaming to be reflective of that. Also, the streams could only be in regions that Spotify was actually deployed. So a lot of moving pieces to do that. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, this is great. Now this industry is just going to continue to grow and accelerate. And we were starting to prepare heading into April for things like, the Masters, with AT&T, and the Final Four kickoff concert as well. And then everything just shut down, right? There was all these ticketed, these in-person events we were doing. Even we have, Hyundai as a client. So there were auto shows that Hyundai does reveals. All the auto shows started to be canceled, and it kind of dawned, it was kind of daunting. I can't imagine what it was like for someone who's operating a venue or who's a music artist. But even as running a live streaming company, I thought, where's this all headed? And it got really quiet for about, a week or 10 days. And then everything started to pivot and turn to, hey, I need to do something that's historically been, a real in-venue experience, and we need to make that virtual. And that could have been, a reveal, a marketing event. It could have been a conference. It could have been a concert. It could have been a performance. And, the pipeline just started to really fill up. And one thing we really endeavored to do, and we still want to do, is help educate the market. Whether you're an emerging musician, you're a venue operator, you're a music executive, a music artist. There's a lot of, I think, the good news is, the industry has grown. There's a lot of attention to it. But there's also a lot of confusion, right? It's a very fragmented market today. And what we've always endeavored to do is apply best practices. How do we make this as akin to a broadcast as we possibly can? How do we eliminate a degradation in the video signal or drop or just audio not working properly? And, so we've been doing our best to espouse that. We've also done a lot of work with causes, and, that's become a big kind of growth area in the live streaming world. Correct. And we want to certainly get into that and talk about NEVA too. But that's kind of been the trajectory. And it was, I don't think anybody could predicted where things were going to go and how they were going to. And I'm happy that the 20 years I've committed to live streaming, now it's a focal point. I certainly wish it were for better reasons. I'm in this business, but I would rather be in front of the stage at a show, at a festival, at, a great small venue down the street than, streaming anything, only streaming. That's tough. But we're all optimistic that we're going to get back to ticketed shows. The good news is I think this is going to carry forward. I think that in my mind, two things have happened in the pandemic. There's been an adoption with user behavior. Everybody has live streamed something, whether you're a grandparent, you're doing a Zoom session with your family, you're a kid who's doing distance learning, or you've watched a Versus show on Instagram, or you tuned into SOS Fest on YouTube. Everyone has live streamed something. And I think now everyone, that's a learned behavior. And second, I think that artists who were resistant to do this previously have all performed in their bedroom or, their living room. And they've done, performances where the spouse has walked through, or their kid or their dog. And the audience has responded. They like to see, authenticity in real time. So I think when we go back to, ticketed performances, it's going to be a logical extension to amplify those shows, whether that's with a brand through a brand partnership. It could be a pay-per-view, ticketing experience. It could be a blend of the two. But I'm excited for the future. I'm certainly excited to get back to in-person experiences, but I do see these two worlds kind of living together going forward.
What are some of the strategies? You said you have a full pipeline, and you've been working with lots of folks over the past year, experimenting, right? So what are some of the things that you've seen that stand out as effective strategies, both, I would say, from an artist perspective, from a brand perspective?
Yeah, I think for the music community, especially for artists, there's a great way to engage, brand partners and sponsors. And, don't forget, they have a challenge as well. Their traditional ways of advertising have efficacy challenges, right? People aren't really, someone in their 20s or their 30s is not, in my mind, they're not watching Law and Order on Thursday night and sitting through the State Farm commercial. They've got to find more effective ways, to reach the consumer. And I think we've seen, sports programming is not at the ratings that it once was. But conversely, you're seeing massive growth on a platform like Twitch. And not just for gaming, but, Twitch is now committed to music, I think, pretty authentically. I think in April, there were 27,000 hours of music content consumed on the Twitch platform. And I think whether you're, a superstar multi-platinum artist or you're an emerging artist, there's ways to find, brand partners out there because of the engagement that live streaming brings. And I think, music, media, and entertainment type content there's a big thirst and a desire for that. So big opportunity there. We've certainly seen an influx of venture money into the live streaming, technical ecosystem. There's an article in Polestar, I think 2 weeks ago, that Techstars is tracking 37 different live streaming pay-per-view companies. I think the number is actually probably higher. I think there's probably 40 or 50 or 60. I don't know if that's the best business for an entrepreneur to be in, but it's a great business for the music community, right? You've got all kinds of different partners to try out and test with. You can probably cut all kinds of terrific deals. So certainly, why not do that? The business I'm largely in is more of being in the background, being a white labeled provider and enabler, letting the venue operator or the music artist have a direct, it's their client. We just provide the kind of shell and the services to pull it off. And we've been successful in doing that. But I would take advantage of the investment dollars that have kind of filled this market and kick the tires and try a lot of these solutions out. I mean, who knows how it's all going to shake out? But I think this is eventually the competition is good for everybody.
I see a comment that I think is actually a good kind of next question for us to talk about, which is clearances and rights holding relationships. I know that, when we were engaged in our Save Our Stages Fest, that was a big topic and a big challenge to unpack. I think there's a lot of, gray area right now in terms of how clearances play out in a live streaming situation. Do you want to give us your opinion on the state of affairs with rights management with respect to live streaming? And maybe we can go from there. And
yeah, you might have more insight to this than I do, but My opinion is that I think there's a lot of confusion when it comes to live streaming about rights. And if we're focused on the kind of live moment in time, that's very different from licensing music in perpetuity for a TV show or a feature film. It's more about that moment in time. And yeah, I think the live streaming technical community is aware that regardless, the rights holders need to be properly compensated. And I think there's a mechanism and a vehicle to do it. However, I think there's also a massive opportunity that live streaming presents for the discovery of recorded music, because people are watching these experiences, for as long as they are. We've done several pay-per-view shows, and the fan watches the show from start to finish, whether that's 60 minutes, 97 minutes, you name it. We've seen it too, borne out with brand presented shows. I think the case in point is, the versus battles on Instagram, the Jill Scott, Erykah Badu battle. Within 72 hours of that broadcast, their stream plays and stream counts had tripled across all platforms. And that's largely, I think, fans saying, oh, I got to see this live performance. Let's go back into the artist catalog and hear these songs again. Or maybe maybe there were younger fans who didn't know their music or weren't as familiar in the stories that they told. I'm going to go dive in and turn up, a whole playlist on Spotify or on Apple. But the rights thing is it's a tough question. I think, what you as a venue operator, what do you come across?
Well, I think an interesting challenge for us is, learning and becoming, adept at clearances, because in order for us to, present content in a meaningful way, we have those, that's something that we have to do. So I think, I think that the challenge there is that there's, essentially a need for, some clarity and standardization in the space, so that it's easier for artists and presenters to make the decision and investment in live streaming.
Right.
But I'm certainly not the one to opine on what those should be. But I know that that's a hot topic currently. So another thing that I think that's also like kind of a good segue into talking about our experience this summer, putting together Save Our Stages Fest, which was, for those of you who are watching, hopefully you all got a chance to check it out. It aired in October, over 3 days. We put together just about 35 performances, original performances, at 25 venues around the country, in partnership with YouTube and Anheuser-Busch. And the effort raised over $3 million for emergency relief funds, and really was an important moment for our advocacy campaign, which culminated in late December very positively. But at first it was just a crazy idea, and we sat down. I guess it must have been like May, maybe late May, early June, right?
Right.
And I'd love to, I think just from a starting for a start, let's talk about the challenges that we were facing at that point from a technical perspective. A big thing, I think I went into it, again, that child in the middle of the movie, thinking we were going to shoot everything live and it was going to be great. And we had to learn that, essentially everything that's put out live is actually live to tape, or I had to learn that.
Well, see, what was the, how did you come to form NEVA first? And what was that like? Because this all came together so fast. I mean, you had to form the association and then create this incredible festival. But how did you and the members and the board, come to the place to form NEVA?
Well, I'll give the shortest version of that story. I think is that it started on a Zoom like this, and I was there were about 70 promoters around the country and venue operators that, had participated in Independent Venue Week. And I was asked to kind of present because of the work that I was doing in Austin at the time. And was, South by was kind of a canary in the coal mine event for that, kind of cascade of cancellations that happened in the spring. So we were just we were talking about what was going to happen. At that time, it wasn't even clear whether this was going to be a 30-day thing or a 60-day thing. And I think that Zoom was kind of like a moment when we figured out that it was going to last for a long time. It was going to be really bad. Paraphrasing, of course, and that we were going to need to start thinking about how we were going to survive from a financial perspective. And the clear kind of answer to that was we were going to need to advocate on our own behalf for federal assistance. And so we formed NEVA. I was elected along with 4 other NEVA members or 4 other independent promoters to form a board and raise some money and hire lobbyists and get to work. And we just kind of like, didn't sleep for 9 months basically. But especially in that first month, we were working like round the clock to stand everything up. And, when we first met, I think we were pretty much like 2 months old at that point. We had just hired our lobbyists. We had just released our first Save Our Stages, campaign for emails to Congress people. And we thought, I think we were all thinking, oh, well, we'll do this. And in July, we'll get what we need. And then we can all kind of like go into hibernation until this is all over. I don't think anybody thought it was going to extend as long as it did, but the kind of writing was on the wall. And I think, when we came together, the thinking for us was that we were going to need to have a backup plan if we couldn't access federal aid, which would be a private emergency relief effort. And so that's where, that's kind of how we ended up on the phone together talking about throwing a big event.
And so the thing that struck me was that 90% of the venues were projected to close and never reopen. And my question is, did you know that early on? Was it the gravity of that statistic apparent early? And
yeah, that was kind of the first signal that we had some more work to do, right? I think, it was just around late May when we did our survey of our members, and asked some really tough questions. And I think that, that kind of information is what armed us to go out and, engage the way that we did with our partners and put together this kind of like, extremely last minute kind of miracle style relief effort. It was, I think actually like, when we first talked to YouTube and Lior, it was the day after the Troubadour had announced it was closing, publicly. And that was a big kind of inflection point, I think, for a lot of people to realize how serious the problem was.
Which led to SOS Fest.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically we made a spreadsheet and we looked at, well, like, how can we do something that's big enough to really impact the whole community? And, this was the thing that checked all the boxes really was, okay, we can spread the message far and wide. We can reemploy underemployed and out of work production and crew. We can provide a great, asset to every artist that wants to participate and tell the story. And we can, ask the public to start helping and donating some funds to keep venues alive. So, live streaming as a tool or as a a framework is just kind of a perfect marriage for us of all the things that we're great at, and also being able to like help all the different people and businesses that are involved with this ecosystem.
And I think we're glossing over the challenge to pull this off, right? We're not going to stream a music festival. That's typically going to be in one place. We're going to have all the gear, all the equipment, and all the artists are going to be at this, dedicated site over 3 to 4 days. And the challenge there is just getting there and setting the gear up, and it's pretty much runs itself. In this case, it was 35 bands performing in 25, different venues, during a pandemic, and kind of pulling this, all together and in a really condensed window of time. And when this was initially presented to us, I thought, wow, this is next to impossible. But to me, the eye opener was first YouTube, I think, was just a terrific partner who bent over backwards, committed all kinds of resources, and went the extra mile in every way. But also, I found that kind of the gritty team of NIVA people who this is what they do every day. They have to hustle under timelines and get things done. It just all worked, and it was the end result. I thought really spoke for itself, where you could see the Foo Fighters performing at the Troubadour, or Miley Cyrus's just amazing performance at the Whiskey, the Roots at the Apollo, and all the other shows in and around that. Plus, I think some of the content that was created. I think that maybe you can speak to it. That Neil Young kind of anthem video was. I saw that. The minute I saw that, it's like a minute. I hit the donate button. I don't know how anyone could watch that video and not react to it.
Oh man, I remember the first time I saw that, and I had chills, hearing his voice telling our story. I think that another thing that encourages donations apparently is tasty guitar riffs. So guitar solos, we've discovered, have a very positive impact on donation numbers. But in terms of the content that we produce, I think what's striking to me about the fest was just the variety and the diversity of the statements that each of these artists made, really about how, what it was like to be an artist in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that, we had real stripped down, simple performances, acoustic, and we had massive, full on, roots jams. And it was just such a reminder of why it's so important to have these things for the future, right? Like, and I think it was the first moment for me that I started to think not just about how are we going to get through the next few months, but what the world is going to look like afterwards. And hopefully, it's a better place for independent artists and the independent ecosystem. And I think, hopefully, we've set we've kind of like started a boulder going down the road, down the hill, so to speak. And it's just, over the next year or two, we'll be able to do so much more in terms of reigniting discovery and development, and impacting our communities.
Yeah, I think we've seen a question about the future of NIVA, and I think one of the things that has struck us is, live streaming is still, obviously it's a growing business, and what we're trying to do is look to bring these experiences onto NIVA stages, and that could be a music performance. A lot of artists are doing pay-per-view, and our opinion is, why not do that on a beautiful independent stage? But more so too, I think we could also see brand marketers do product releases, or there could be events, or even marketing events where people are going to launch a product. And going through this exercise and being around SOS Fest, I think there's a huge opportunity here. And the other emerging thing that's happened in live streaming is when there's a cause associated with a live stream, we tend to have a better experience. And by better, I mean a chat that's more about what's actually happening, the video and the cause versus spam and rhetoric and so forth. It's just better for everybody, music, the venue, the participant, the artist, and or the brand, and certainly the viewer. Can you speak a little bit about what you see as the future of NEVA?
That's a tough question to answer, because certainly, our focus is still really mainly on implementing SOS acts or the SOS grants. And that's going to be the case for the next 3 to 6 months. There's also, a significant amount of work left to be done in terms of creating and deploying programs that can continue to help. So I feel like we're at a point where we've created a foundation that's focused on a number of different elements outside of just the business of, owning or running a stage or promoting shows. And so I think what we'll see over the next few months is, our organizations kind of like refacing ourselves towards the future and reopening and, trying to celebrate and work towards that moment as opposed to, what we've had to been doing, which is look for how we're going to get through the next 4 to 6 weeks. I can tell you as an operator, especially, I slept, for the first time in months, like fully over the past few weeks, and everybody's, we're all starting to think about planning for the future and how we can best continue to serve our communities. And so NEVA is going to be, continue to be a linchpin for, the efforts that we continue to take on the advocacy front and in terms of connecting and empowering our network of independents, to produce and develop artists and content.
And there is an extension of SOS Fest, right, with music nights?
Right. So we have content that we're producing and I suppose at this point we kind of have a cadence where, we just have been, going around and replicating the SOS model, in a microcosm whenever we can and wherever we can. And we're starting to work with a number of different brands and partners and platforms to do the same sorts of things. Because like I said, really simple, having a live streaming event at an independent venue with an artist that's, really checking all the boxes in terms of how we can continue to support the music ecosystem through the pandemic. It hits all the boxes.
For sure. So I think so we have some questions, and John Kennedy asked about gamification and live streaming, and what does that mean? Is it a fad? Will it go forward? So my perspective on that is I've certainly learned one glaring thing from all my time in all the shows that I've done is, if you stream for the sake of streaming, it's going to be a very flat experience, right? If it's surveillance video or webcam video, even if you've got, Drake or The Weeknd, the audience is going to come and check that out, but they're not going to stick around, and they're probably not going to come back to future experiences. So we've learned things like, turning on things like chat and polling, trivia, calls to action, maybe a side stream about what you're watching. The great thing about SOS Fest were these incredible interviews. I mean, there was as example, I think Slash just gave this great talk about how he grew up down the street from the Troubadour. And when they were young guys, they would just go and hang out there. And some of the music that is iconic and famous to the band was really the first time ever performed, on that stage. So getting back to the question, you've got to allow the viewer to, become a participant in the stream. That's, the most successful way to execute. And I think that's a persistent takeaway that will, go forward. And then, I think
All right. I'm back.
no problem. And another question that we've been asked, I think, comes up around cost to execute live streams. And there's no way around the fact that you need to film the video, and that's just a related, that's a cost of doing anything. Fortunately, the cost of production has dropped. People have gear and equipment. We've shot shows in the pandemic on Samsung S20 mobile handsets, and this is for BET, right? This is broadcast on the linear channel. The front of that phone is 4K. The reverse is 8K. So you get a pretty high level of quality. But first and foremost, the question is, how do you assess and address that cost? One thing to better manage that cost is, right now there's not really an audience in these rooms, no matter where you're performing. So you can certainly shoot the show in advance, pre-record and then play it out as a live experience, allowing the audience to consume it together in real time with chat and polling and so forth. That certainly works. You give up the ability to interact in real time and take a question in real time or take direction. Or we did a show back in July on the Genius platform where Wiz Khalifa performed, and the audience could pick certain songs in the set in real time, with Wiz. And then the other costs for execution involve the technical workflow services, things like video transmission and encoding. The song, the performance, the video needs to be digitized to be published and put out to wherever the distant destination point is. Not a massive cost, however, and we evangelize this. Go as wide as you can in a live broadcast. Don't just put it on one platform. We've done shows. Example, the Small Business Live Festival with Superfly this summer lived on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram on like 15 aggregate accounts across those platforms. So there's certainly an inherent cost to go wider because you're tripling or quadrupling the encoding to make those shows happen, but you reach and inform a much bigger audience. Part and parcel with that too is where your fans are, right? If you're an artist who's invested heavily in Facebook, know that you want to make sure you're putting shows on that platform. If you've invested heavily in Instagram, that should be a priority as well. But there certainly is a cost to do this. And there are ways though to manage and mitigate. Again, I still emphasize the conversations with brand marketers who have not only a cord cutting problem, they have a brand safety problem and an ad blocker problem. And live video is a compelling way around that, and I think can open up and extract dollars to offset some of these costs. It's like we've lost Steve, so I'll skim through some of the comments here and see if I can answer any particular questions.
Hey, John, I've got a question for you. Can you talk about real dollars? What, give us kind of a gold, silver, bronze level production.
A great question. In fact, we tend to price things that way. If we're doing an event for a client like American Express, they're gonna want 6 high definition Sony cameras. They're probably going to want the crew to be there for rehearsal the day before and the day of the show the following day. I mean, that can get into the 6-figure realm pretty quickly. I think there's a middle of the road figure that number can come down significantly, but also there's ways to do this at a fraction of that cost. We can certainly bring in a less of a camera footprint. Maybe it could be 3. But also doing it all the same day certainly helps. I've architected my business to have video producers in all the main hubs, Austin, Nashville, LA, New York, and we can quickly so in other words, we're bringing the crew to do the work versus filling a plane with people in LA and flying a team of 12 around the country. So that's certainly helped mitigate and drive down some of those costs. But it's going to be in some of those various ranges. I think on the low end, $15,000 to $20,000, mid 40 to 60, and then you're going to get into these, massive experiences. They're going to be, 100 to 200K.
What are some of the best success stories of artists, maybe indie artists, really making real money during the pandemic doing this? You have any case studies to point to?
Yeah, I saw a report that came out yesterday that live streaming pay-per-view generated $600 million in sales, which to me is impressive. Independently, we did. I thought a show I can share. There's a band, July Talk, that's a Canadian band that had done 2 nights at a drive-in outside of Toronto, and both nights had sold out. And the band decided to do a live stream pay-per-view of the performance, and visually stunning. Fortunately, the band is comprised of filmmakers, and they had 8 cameras, including drone coverage. But the live stream on their site was done in black and white with amazing cuts and split screens, but in true stereo audio. And I thought that was just a super execution, and just pristine, beautiful, almost the next best thing to you physically being at that show was this live stream, and largely because it also happened on the band's website. You didn't have to go to anywhere else. You could actually live inside of that community, buy your ticket, and attend that show for 2 consecutive evenings. And I think that there's certainly a lot of great platforms that are evolving. I look at a platform like Sessions. I think Tim Westergren's company is doing real good work in the space. So there certainly are a lot of options. But I think the consumer audience is like all of us, is stuck at home. They have, they would, if anything, I think people would rather be at live music shows more than anything, even attending a professional sports game. So there is an audience to do this. I think they're open and willing to pay. I can cite, we did a terrific show with Avril Lavigne in October. Avril suffers from Lyme disease and was doing her show to support the Global Lyme Alliance and her hashtag, Fight Lyme campaign. And she brought in Alessia Cara, Rob Thomas, and One Republic, and put together this incredible show. And the audience could buy a ticket. They could buy a ticket and a custom T-shirt to commemorate the experience, or pay a VIP package and go to the sound check before the show, and also submit a question that Avril would. I think she took 8 to 12 and answered those questions. So you kind of get the spectrum in those 2 executions, but certainly a lot of opportunity.
Steven, you're back.
I am back, and I'm sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties. Probably a good example of having redundancy is an important part of any live streaming experience. And so that was just a demonstration of.
Very true.
Now everybody's met Hansel, my dog, which was bound to happen at some point. So I'm sorry about that. I guess I missed a little bit of what you were just talking about, but I imagine it seemed like it was activations that you were impressed with, or thought really kind of hit the nail on the head. Is that accurate?
Case studies of artists making it happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Same question for venues. What sort of venues out there have really put a flag in the ground and are making some exciting things happening with these streams?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there's hundreds of our members that are engaged in live streaming of some sort, and I really couldn't pick one particular venue to say that they're doing something. They're all doing amazing stuff, and I think really what I'm interested in, or what we're interested in, is how to turn the volume up and be able to do more, because we have we have so much opportunity and so much open space on our stages, and this is kind of the mission this year, is to see how loud we can get with our friends, with some instruments and some technology, and with John and folks like his help. So I think I saw a couple of questions about what does it cost to do this kind of stuff, and I think that's always a difficult question, because the answer is you can do it for a couple bucks, you can do it for nothing, or you can spend $1 zillion. It really just comes down to, you get what you pay for. That's a truism in our business, and I think understanding goals and objectives you have to, kind of make decisions based on that. But on, from our perspective, I think our goal as a group is to be able to provide, the highest quality. Like when I say as a group, I mean independent venues and NEVA, and as it's related to this type of content, is to be able to provide efficiencies of scale and high quality without as high a price tag as we've seen in the past. And the combination of expertise on the Bulldog team and a variety of different technologies, both in the platform space and in the hardware space, are enabling us to do that. And so that's another really exciting thing is, and this is true of any kind of technology, as it becomes more ubiquitous, the entry costs decrease. At the beginning of our conversation, John, you talked about a format war that you saw back in the day. There have been a number of format wars. This is a pattern that repeats in the entertainment and content marketplace. And I think that it's clear that there is something similar happening today. Both, I think, in the stratosphere of Facebook and YouTube and the large platforms, and then in the entrepreneurial space with pay-per-view offerings and a variety of other means of delivering this kind of content. Do you have any thoughts on this format war? And are there lessons we can learn from the past that we can apply here? Are there opportunities that we're not all seeing? Because you're the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, I touched a little bit on this, but I think that competition in the tech world, especially for enablement of monetization, i.e. pay-per-view, is good for the content community, for artists, and I think for the venues as well. Why not, again, test and play with those platforms, because I think they're going to give, great deals, because they have to all compete with each other. And, we use the term in the tech world, land grab. You got to get as many deals and partners and content allies as you possibly can. So that's a good thing. How it all shakes out, I'm not sure. I think it ends up, like anything, when you go through these wars or these competitive landscapes, you end up having a couple of key companies standing, at the end of the day. But certainly, I think it's to the content creators, benefit to jump into that world and try it all out. I'm a big advocate, for my industry. I want, hopefully, all of those shows and all those experiences will happen on NEVA stages. And again, the call we want to put out there is not only to the tech community, but also to the advertising community. If you're going to do cool things, why not do them in a venue that the talent that you're booking was either discovered or launched their careers on that stage, or they're an emerging artist and they can play with 3,000 venues. There's probably a ton of venues within a tiny radius around any artist in the country right now. So that's my philosophy.
I mean, I couldn't agree with that more. I think that one of the things that's important from a creator or a producer perspective, I think, to remember is how valuable that contribution is. And I think sometimes, especially in the technology space, the role that a creator plays in this whole ecosystem gets kind of pushed to the side or undervalued. And I'm very happy to see, at the highest levels, that folks are turning towards or understanding how critical that role is. And that's the opportunity, to maximize value and really make this stuff, impactful, professionally, in terms of community, et cetera.
Agreed.
We have time maybe for one last question. Let's see if there's one here in the chat. I don't see anything new. Do you want to say something, Tom? It seems like you're talking, you're muted.
Sorry, yeah, I have one question. How can the audience continue to support what you guys are doing? I've already posted the SOS website, but what else can we do?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, certainly the first and foremost thing is to engage with us and check out the website. There's going to be future advocacy calls, and there's certainly going to be a need for all of the folks in our community to continue to work together, both in terms of what we're doing, from a political perspective, but even more important, I think, let's just all work together. I'm here, John's here. There's a whole team of us at NEVA and around it, and I think the message is very simple. Think about independent venues when you think about content, and let's work together to do things that help our community and empower the artists and the people that we love and respect so much.
John, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And, I know, I think my company, we've got, big clients like AT&T and Coca-Cola, but, we're in a different time right now and we want to be helpful. So we're happy to provide insight, research, things that we've learned along the way. When we talk about best practices, that's come through trial and error. We've learned what to do, what not to do, what's going to happen, in a particular venue of a certain size and stature. And we get it. We're probably going to be in this condition for another year, hopefully not much longer. But, we want to be helpful to any and all folks in the space and be a resource. And, certainly we're big champions of NEVA and want to see more things happen on those stages. So.
Thank you for your support, John. And thanks for this time, Tom.
Absolutely. Thank you to both of you for the work that you're doing to make the music industry more viable to everybody. Without the work of companies like yours, organizations like yours, we'd all be really screwed. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to encourage the audience to keep investing your time and your resources in these outlets. I put John and Stephen's LinkedIn URLs in the chat. Hit them up, do business with them. And then one final announcement, this Thursday is our second program of the year. And as much as we learned about live streaming in this one, you're going to learn that much more about podcasting in that one. This is Podcasting for Artists. So check it out. It's at 4 o'clock on Thursday, 4 o'clock Eastern. That's 1 p.m. Pacific. And finally, stay safe and healthy. And I can't wait to see you guys out and about at a live show sometime soon.
Likewise.